He fought in 3 wars and led thousands, but on a sunny Texas morning, General Alexander Mathis was forced to kneel, simply because of the color of his skin. Officers Lowry and Moore didn't just detain him without cause. They mocked him online, turning a decorated hero into a viral joke. But a bystander's phone caught what they tried to hide, and that single recording changed everything. Just wait until you hear how this quiet general shook the nation, and why justice came crashing down in the end. It was a bright, dry morning in a quiet corner of suburban Texas. The sun hung high, casting long, clean shadows across the manicured lawns and polished gates of the Westview Ridge Golf Club, a members-only retreat known more for its exclusivity than its hospitality. Inside a parked patrol car near the club entrance, 2 officers sat idle. Sergeant Dan Lowry, broad-shouldered with a buzz cut and mirrored sunglasses, leaned back with a smirk. His partner, Sergeant John Moore, leaner, always chewing gum, tapped a finger on the dash, scanning the parking lot. That's when they saw him. A black man, tall and well-built, stepped out of a jet-black Range Rover. He was dressed in a clean, gray athletic tracksuit. Not flashy, but expensive if you knew where to look. He moved with the kind of posture that couldn't be faked. Straight back, squared shoulders, effortless precision. He didn't hesitate. He wasn't looking around. He wasn't confused. He knew where he was going. Dan adjusted his belt and leaned forward. "Look at this, John," he muttered. "Did they start letting anyone roll in here?" John grinned. Maybe he got lost. Or maybe his Uber forgot to drop him off downtown. They laughed quietly. Not loudly, just enough to let the contempt settle. They didn't hide it. They didn't care to. This wasn't the kind of man they expected to see in this neighborhood. Not walking up to that clubhouse. Dan opened the door. "Let's go have a word." They approached the man with deliberately relaxed strides, their hands casually near their belts. Dan smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach the eyes. "Good morning, sir," he said, voice coated in polite tension. "Just a heads up, this is private property. Can we see some ID?" The man stopped, turned slowly. His gaze was calm, unthreatening, steady. "May I ask why?" he replied, voice low, measured. Dan's expression hardened just a fraction. "You're acting suspicious," he said. John took a step closer, already shifting his weight like he was ready for escalation. "Hands behind your back. Now." The man didn't flinch. He didn't argue. He simply nodded, lowered his arms, and complied. Not because he agreed, but because he understood. Words wouldn't matter. Not here. Not now. They turned him around, forced him to his knees on the sun-baked asphalt. His palms pressed against the pavement. Heat seared through the fabric of his clothes. He remained silent. A few people looked on from nearby. A club employee froze in the doorway. One man across the parking lot began recording on his phone, despite sharp glares from the officers. Dan barked, "Name?" The man lifted his head slightly. "General Alexander Mathis, United States Army, retired." John snorted. "Yeah, sure, and I'm the president." Dan reached into the man's jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet. Inside, an official military ID. 4 stars, gold seal, national insignia. The air changed. John leaned in, squinting at the card. "Wait." Neither of them spoke for a moment. General Mathis lifted his gaze. He didn't shout. He didn't shake. His eyes were cold, unblinking. The kind of silence that carried more weight than any voice. They had tried to break him, reduce him, diminish him to a statistic, a stereotype. But he was no stranger to pressure. He had stood through mortar fire, sat in front of senators, walked through the rubble of foreign cities with lives depending on his decisions. Yet here, on American soil, in a peaceful suburb, he had just been made to kneel. And that was something different. The humiliation didn't end on the asphalt. As Sergeant Moore stood to the side, holding General Mathis's ID with widening eyes, his partner, Sergeant Lowry, pulled out his phone and angled it toward the man still kneeling under the harsh sun. He hit record. Moments later, the clip went live, uploaded without context to Lowry's personal social account. The caption read, "Claims he's a general. We think he's just pretending." The video spread fast. Within the hour, it had been shared across TikTok, reposted to Instagram, lifted onto Facebook. View counts surged. Comments flooded in. Some laughed, others sneered. A few added mocking captions of their own. Even those who didn't know the truth, who didn't care to ask, joined the chorus. They made memes. They tagged friends. They turned one of the most decorated veterans of the U.S. Army into a trending joke. Meanwhile, in a quiet home office lined with plaques and folded flags, General Alexander Mattes sat in his leather chair, staring silently at a frame on the wall. It held photos, names, faces. They were his soldiers, young men and women, some barely out of high school, who had trusted him with their lives, who had followed his orders in the middle of nowhere, under gunfire, through sandstorms and chaos. Many of them hadn't come home. They had believed in the mission, believed in the country. And now? Now their commander's name was being twisted into mockery, laughed at by strangers, stripped of context, turned into a spectacle. He didn't feel anger right away. He felt something heavier, a kind of quiet betrayal, not by two officers, by something deeper. The next morning, the golf club issued an apology, a generic email signed by a manager. But from the police department, nothing. No call, no statement, no accountability. So he made a call of his own. Her name was Ashley Rogers, young, sharp, and fearless, the daughter of a Vietnam veteran and civil rights activist. She had graduated top of her class and built a reputation for taking on the impossible cases. She listened calmly as Mattes spoke. When he finished, she looked him in the eye. "We're not just going to file a complaint," she said. "We're going to set a precedent." He nodded. It wasn't about revenge. It was about dignity. But almost immediately they ran into walls. Body cam footage, unavailable. The officer's dashboard camera, malfunctioned. Incident reports, delayed. And the video, deleted, or so they claimed. The official word was that the man had matched the description of a suspect. No apology, no ownership, just a carefully worded deflection. It was then that Mattes felt it with absolute clarity. This wasn't about a mistake. It wasn't just two rogue officers. It was the system, old, rotting, designed to protect itself. But Alexander Mattes had spent a lifetime staring down systems, foreign and domestic. He'd faced ambushes, bureaucracy, and war rooms filled with doubt. He wasn't about to retreat now. On the third day after the incident, attorney Ashley Rogers walked into the newsroom of a local television station with two files in hand. One was a high-resolution scan of General Mattes's military ID, 4 stars, unmistakable seal, impeccable service record. The second was a video, unedited, captured by the phone of a bystander in the parking lot. In it, Sergeant Moore could clearly be heard muttering to his partner, unaware the camera had picked up every word. "He's black. Doesn't matter if he's a general. Still suspicious." It was the sentence that broke the silence. Within hours, the footage spread like wildfire. CNN, MSNBC, The Washington Post, even Fox News. Headlines poured in from every direction. Retired 4-star general wrongfully detained. Caught on tape, racial bias exposed in Texas suburb. General Mattes speaks out. And he did. That evening, standing in front of a plain beige wall in a modest press room, General Mattes gave a statement broadcast live to millions. He wore no uniform, no medals, just a dark navy sweater and the weight of his experience. "I don't want revenge," he began, voice calm, eyes steady. "I want truth. I want my granddaughter. Her name is Camilla, and she just turned 6. To grow up in a country where she never has to see her grandfather brought to his knees because of the color of his skin. I served in 3 wars under this flag, but today I fight for peace." There was no rage in his voice, only clarity, and that's what made the room fall silent. The public responded. Outrage surged through social media. Thousands gathered in peaceful demonstrations across major cities. Hashtags trended for days. Support poured in from veterans, civil rights groups, teachers, athletes, even sitting members of Congress. 3 days later, the local chief of police submitted his resignation. Dan Lowry and John Moore were terminated from the department. Formal misconduct charges were filed by the state's attorney general. And in the state senate, a bill titled Lex Matis, named by the public, was introduced. Its purpose, to prohibit biased detainments on private property without concrete cause. The language was clear. The impact, potentially national. On sidewalks in front of city halls and public squares, signs began to appear. Not all heroes wear medals. Sometimes they simply stand. General Matis is my hero. But for Alexander Matis, this was never about recognition. A few days after the storm passed, he stepped onto the wooden deck of his backyard as the sun sank behind the trees. The light was soft, golden, the air still. There on the patio sat little Camilla, legs crossed, drawing chalk hearts and stars on the concrete. A rainbow sprawled beside her name in giant letters. She looked up as he approached. "You're on the news again, Grandpa," she said brightly. He smiled, knelt beside her. "Yes, sweetheart, I am. But what matters most is that you're free." She tilted her head, thinking, "Can I be a general too?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he brushed a wisp of her hair behind her ear and looked her in the eye. "You can be anything you choose to be," he said, "and no one will ever stop you." She beamed and went back to her chalk, humming. Behind them, the last light of the day slipped quietly below the horizon, and with it, a piece of the old silence finally disappeared.